Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Wellness Wednesday Inspiration. My name is Fernanda Torres, and I am here with Dr. Linda Marquez. And we have a guest today, Dr. Aly Cohen, and I'm super excited about bringing her in to the show today. We're going to be talking about toxics and everything that is in our environment. So how to protect your kids from toxic chemicals was a TED Talk she did, and I actually watched it yesterday. It was phenomenal. And yes, we'll get a lot more into Dr. Ailey in a little bit. Dr. Linda, how are you doing?
I'm good. Happy Wednesday.
Happy Wednesday. How was your morning?
It's been good, busy. Every day is busy, and it's good. So I have no complaints. And I know you and I are kind of on the same schedule with you get up in the morning, do your meditation, go work out, and do our self-care routine first in the morning so that we can go out and serve at a better capacity. So I really think that's so important. And I was going to text you in the morning just to say, hey, where are you? Are you out riding your bike?
I was up at 4 in.the.morning. You're right.
Wow, you're up early. Okay. I was up at 4:55, so it's still kind of that 4 o'clock hour.
Still counts.
But it's all good. Wednesdays are, I really look forward to Wednesdays. People call them hump days. It's like for us, it's our, Wellness Wednesday inspiration to just bring some information and just topics that are very applicable for people, lifestyle strategies. And today is going to be absolutely perfect. And as you were mentioning with Dr. Ailey about, you took a look at her TED Talk. I think it was phenomenal. And well, let's introduce her. Dr. Aly Cohen, she's a medical doctor. She has a practice in Princeton, New Jersey. And I love her approach because it is a very integrative approach. She's a rheumatologist, and she blends, I think, a lot of traditional medicine, which she learned, but along the way, she's been building her toolbox with functional medicine, nutrition, lifestyle changes, everything that we talk about and that we love to share with, with our patients, with people that listen to this podcast. So it's really exciting to have her on, especially because her approach is an integrative approach, and it's I always feel integrative approach is the only way to go, where doctors actually take the time to listen and explain things to you. And she was on of course one of the TED Talks, and how difficult it is to get on stage and just be a very refined speaker and have a great message that will resonate with people is huge. So I'm excited that we have her on, and she's got a new book out too. So we definitely want her to share about her new book, and she's probably been all over right now, super busy with promoting her book. So I'm really excited to have her on. So she's a very seasoned physician, and y'all are going to love her. So let's bring on the doc.
All right. Dr. Ailey, how are you doing?
Hi, guys. How are you?
So happy to be here with you today.
My pleasure. Thanks for asking me. It was just a thrill. I said, yes, let's do it. So thank you so much.
Yeah. One of the things that really I was just captivated about with your talk, your information on your website, and I know you've been interviewing, but I want people to hear you and get to know you, like what really drove you. There's always a backstory. There's always a story to the story of a person's, like, because you're very passionate about environmental health, and it's so relevant in how it impacts every single person. The topic that what we're going to cover today, it's just like, hey, it doesn't matter how old you are, how fit you are. It does not matter. It impacts everyone. So I would love to hear how, because your training is conventional medicine training, and a lot of it is not, from my understanding, there's a lot of my colleagues that are medical doctors, it's not a lot of what you're doing. So I would love to hear the story behind the story.
Well, I'll tell you, it was kind of serendipitous how I even got into this area of environmental health, which is how our environment affects human health. And that really is not limited to just chemicals, and we get into other types of environmental exposures that have a real impact on human health, be it radiation, which we have a whole chapter talking about our tech toys and how to manage them very safely as we move forward, but also stress is an environmental exposure, synthetic light, noise pollution. And so when you really start to step back and think, well, what are the things that actually impact human health? It's a broad range. It's not just diet. It's not just exercise. It's a variety of things that contribute to whether or not people get ill or not. And it's also a combination with their genetics. So all of that plays a little dance and kind of determines who will be eventually, if they will, get sick or not. But to your question, that you said, how did I get into this? Well, I started off as a very, I would say typical doctor going through the Western training. And I was, always a little interested why they never really taught us nutrition. Not that I was so nutritious back then. I was probably eating a lot of junk and I, partied a lot in college. And so, it's not like it was on the forefront of my mind. But as I started moving through training programs and fellowships and getting really, understanding the human body and physiology, I just couldn't believe that nutrition is not part of medical school training. It's bizarre. And even now, currently, there's about 5 hours of nutrition training in medical schools for the whole 4 years. I mean, it's just mind-blowing. But certainly there's no environmental health. And that's what also kind of fueled my fire. But I got into this really because my dog got ill. It's in the TED Talk. My dog got really sick. I was a new mom, young kids, and out of nowhere, my puppy got sick. He was about 4.5 years old, and he developed autoimmune hepatitis, which is completely unusual for a dog, let alone a golden retriever. But what was upsetting to me was why we didn't know how he got sick. And so I explored his drinking water and the pesticides that are sprayed in our farm area in New Jersey. I was looking at his dog collar with the pesticide, flea and tick collars. I was looking at the toy that never left his mouth that was plastic. But as I was starting to explore his issues and why he might have gotten sick, it opened up a Pandora's box of all of these lagging regulations or lack thereof of air quality, pollution, and how that may affect human health, and lack of appropriate regulation for drinking water contaminants, which are outdated from 1976 or 74, even before that. Personal care products and cleaning products in this country have absolutely no required testing for their ingredients before they go into products that end up on our shelves. People don't know that. I was blown away by that. So as I was looking at his issues, I was opening up a lot of questions, and then it began my journey. So for 8 years, I studied this and got to listen to some of the most brilliant people in environmental health, biology, toxicology, and it really formulated where I stand now. And the book is an accomplishment of struggle, of frustration, of putting together the best of what I could figure out and not having to let people go 8 years trying to figure it out on their own in order to reduce those exposures for their bodies and for their family members.
Wow. That was mind-blowing to me too when I was listening to your TED Talk and you were talking about all these products and how the lack of regulation, and it's like, how is it even possible that that's allowed? That people can just go to the store and buy all these chemicals. I was reading a documentary about Roundup recently and how that's a cancer chemical and toxin, and everybody used to have it, and there is lawsuits and everything, and nothing really changes. Nothing really changes as far as regulations.
And that, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say the problem is because in the United States, we are really, we are biased towards, the regulations are biased towards manufacturers. I mean, we as consumers are not entitled to know the actual ingredients, for instance, in the word fragrance or perfume, whichever way they spell it, on a cosmetic bottle. We have nothing in terms of great food, regulations other than perhaps organic. USDA organic is the only thing in this country that has any teeth. And it has its issues, but it's primarily the best thing we have for reducing genetically modified ingredients, reducing the pesticide load that gets into our food, and, other synthetic chemicals, preservatives, emulsifiers, coloring, a whole variety of chemicals that are actually absolutely allowed to be in our food. There's upwards of 3,000 food additive chemicals that are allowable, most of which have not been tested for safety or toxicity, specifically in certain populations such as children or pregnant women or those who have an immune compromised situation. So, it just was just mind blowing. And, in the 1940s and 50s is really when our chemical explosion happened. We actually call it the synthetic age, which I write about in the book. And essentially, we just exploded with chemistry for materials like naugahyde and rayon and plexiglass. We came up with all these pesticides because we had people going to war in World War II. So everyone was coming up with great pesticides to kill all the bugs overseas. We were using new metals. It got to a point where, we exploded. So now, essentially, 40, 50 years later, we're the victims of our own pollution, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That was the perfect answer to my next question, actually, which is why do we live in a toxic environment? And that's exactly why.
Exactly. And it's because we're really not regular. I mean, in Europe, for instance, they have a much stricter system and regulated system for oversight of chemicals. They've taken over 1,200 chemicals off of their market that would normally go into products or go into food, processed foods. In this country, we have only taken out 5 chemicals off of our market since 1976. And we currently have, just to give you some numbers, over 90,000 commercial and industrial chemicals that are used in all of our products, cleaning, couch guards for stains, degreasers, our cosmetics. 90,000 are what we are surrounded by in many ways, of course, through air pollution and products. But in Europe, they have just a much more stringent system, which really puts it back on us. Again, another reason why I wrote this book was because I didn't want to wait for legislation to change. Mm-hmm. I don't understand that. And I am seeing, as a rheumatologist, internist, and an integrative doctor, I see all different age groups and all different illnesses. And I'm seeing sicker and sicker people, and even at younger and younger ages. And so out of frustration for this, I said, let's try to figure out what we can actually make a dent in. And this is one area that we can do that in.
Mm-hmm. And that is so critical, because as long as people are not educated and as long as you are not looking out for your own health, when you go to the store and you're buying your own products, nothing's going to change. As long as these companies are continuing to make money and legislation continues to support those companies, nothing's ever going to change. So that brings it back to our responsibility. The responsibility is on ourselves, and not what the companies that are selling these products. They're looking out for themselves, and we need to look out for ourselves.
Absolutely. I think we're at a point where if we have the right information from vetted resources, which is, again, this book is filled with vetted resources, nothing wacky, nothing fringe. We don't promote brands because brands change. Companies get out of business. Companies buy each other, change formulations, even on personal care products, makeup, hair, shampoo. These formulations change up when they're purchased by other companies. So what we wanted to do is to have a living, breathing resource that you could tap into if you wanted to look up your lipsticks or your shampoo or your body sprays. You can look up how to manage your lawn with, instead of pesticides, we have a bunch of resources for ways to do it without harmful pesticides. And of course, drinking water, which is one of my biggest issues, really, by body mass index in terms of exposure. We really need to understand how really dirty the water is in the United States. And, whether you hear about Flint, which is horrendous, or Newark, New Jersey with its lead, or chromium-6, or the PFAS fluoralkyls that are making their way down, in New York and all those waterways in the Midwest, if it's a hot new chemical, great, but we need to be able to get rid of that before it hits our glass. And that's the kind of conversation we talk about in the drinking water chapter. So we want it to be usable and live on beyond, changes in the market, and to really give people, including pregnant women, and pre-pregnant women, an opportunity to think about what they do with their bodies, perhaps before they get pregnant, if that's possible, or during pregnancy, or even after pregnancy, if you didn't have a chance to learn this, like I didn't. Back when I had my kids, I would have done things differently. But when you know better, you do better. So, you know, that's what it's about. It's empowering. It's not judgmental. It is about a journey of you to really do it at a, you know, in a pace that makes sense and that will stick and that's affordable and livable. So anyway, I want to make sure people understand that the book is really not a standing still. It's a movement. It's a real gradual progression of how you change your lifestyle.
That's awesome.
What is one of the ways that you start with some of your patients? Like I know with your specialty is rheumatology, and it really is linked to an autoimmune condition. You know, and a lot of the autoimmune conditions, as I've always seen in the practice, is I always tell patients, okay, there's going to be another one lingering somewhere. So, you know, the approach, and especially because a lot of it can be, we say kind of dialed down, you can turn down the fire with the diet and lifestyle. Is that, do you find that you find a lot of resistance? But you know, a lot of people will come to you and they're in so much pain. Their quality of life has been diminished tremendously. They have been, I always say, they have been taught that if you have a problem, here's a pill. And here they're coming to you, you know, as a traditional practitioner. And you're like, no, let's change this. How, are you finding that your patients are open to that? Or, you know, because as you were mentioning, you know, I always look at research and see who's funding the research. But there really isn't a lot of money to be made in anything that's natural by you changing your diet, by using maybe vinegar in your house and lemon and baking soda like our grandparents and great-grandparents used to use. There is no, you know, there isn't a financial gain in that. So how do you kind of maneuver that around people, because they have been taught a certain way, and that's all it's a belief that they've been taught, and not all beliefs are correct, and beliefs can be changed.
Well, I think that's the whole system, not just including patients. I have a very hard time getting through to physicians and healthcare providers and people who kind of stuck in their ways. And, you know, listen, I think it comes down to being a good communicator, and that's taken years to hone. You know, people in the sales business, what's the difference with medicine, right? It's the same idea, is that you're convincing someone that something matters. You know, I say always meet persons where they're at. You know, meet people where they're at and where they're willing to make changes. Because if certainly not everyone wants to jump in and go nuts, you want to meet people where they're willing to maneuver in a way that's reasonable for them. And if it's just starting with getting rid of their air fresheners, you know, that's a great place to start. It's cheaper. You know, if you get rid of, I would say 75 to 80% of commercial cleaning products that we are marketed to believe we have to have, or we're bad people or something, I think you would remove an enormous amount of toxins and harmful chemicals just by not bringing it into your home to start with. And when it comes to even changes with diet, I mean, autoimmune disease, as you know, you mentioned, is on the rise. And it's not just because, say, clinicians are better at diagnosing it. That may be a very good, you know, a good component. But it's really the majority, and the association with our environment is relatively strong. And we now know, so rheumatoid arthritis patients, 1% of the US population has rheumatoid, but upwards of 10% of our American population has some type of autoimmune disease, whether it's multiple sclerosis or Crohn's or ulcerative colitis, you know, any of the rheumatologic, you know, lupus. So, you know, the idea that we are getting, and these are people, by the way, that generally don't even have a family history of autoimmune disease. So this is like de novo autoimmune disease coming out of nowhere, people wondering why they got this. And it's a very hard conversation to have with people. But what my messaging is you can do something about that, and you can work on your immune system. And one of the key ways to do that is actually removing the junk that actually brings us down immunologically. And that's the junk food with the chemicals. We know they raise inflammatory markers in the blood. We know that these cosmetics actually go through the skin. Feminine care products, tampons, they are filled with chemicals unless you get vetted organic brands of, say, tampons, and make sure that they're not plastic applicators, which contribute to the world's refuse because they're considered medical waste and, not reusable. So the idea that we are exposed on so many levels, the one thing we start with, besides, obviously any acute issues of someone really having trouble, is we start deciding what is our time frame of changing things. Mm-hmm. And what if it's once a month, or, changing your water filter system is the biggest maneuver you could do out of the starting gate. Or maybe it's just a matter of, cutting down on Cheese Whiz and Oreos like I did. So, you have to meet people where they're at. But really, my message for the book is take each chapter at your own pace. Water chapter, food chapter, detox chapter, which is harnessing your own body's natural anthropologic methods of getting rid of these chemicals. And I talk about that. Chemicals in furniture and how to choose a couch. Vaping and all the indoor and outdoor components of healthy lungs, understanding how to talk to your kids about vaping and other adults. So, we kind of divided in sections for easy use, and you just have to dive in at your own pace. But at least the resources are going to be, reputable and good scientific evidence-based information.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Ailey, let me ask you, when I was looking at the TED Talk, I noticed that you said that you conducted experiments, and yes, it was a small sample, but you welcomed everybody who was listening to the video to basically kind of just do their own mini experiments at home, and they're going to basically obtain the same results. And the results are that we, on average, use about 50 chemicals in a day, or we're exposed to about 50 different chemicals in a day. And that's from what we are putting in our bodies, to what we're eating, to what we're breathing, what we're using in our houses, et cetera, et cetera. So that leads to the next question. What are the most common toxins that you feel or that that we're exposed to at home, at work, in our environment? What are the main things that you would say, okay, if you could do something, these are the top things?
Yeah, so I look at water and food as two of the really key ones, because we consume water by body mass index more than anything, really, and even children by body mass index even more so. So I really like people to consider and think about where their water comes from, and whether it comes from a well, which has its own issues, or whether it comes from municipal tap water or city water, which really does serve about 240 million Americans out of 310. So most of us get city water in this country. And whether it comes from either source, you have the ability to filter your water, which I do recommend based on what we're finding now across the country. And then we give a variety of different choices of types of filtration, because one filter may not fit someone's home or be the right choice if they're moving apartments or they're a college student or what have you. So we want people to have the idea of, which filters serve which function, and, that it's cost available. It's not cost prohibitive to filter your water. So that's a really big discussion that I like to have with patients. Cutting back on, processed foods, going more with whole foods, things that have not been, cooked or shuffled or packaged, and really things that are more that you would find at an outdoor market. Looking for pesticide-free foods like organic foods, which reduce those dramatically, or, just simply washing your produce and agitating it in clean water with white vinegar. Very, very inexpensive, produce cleaner. Again, getting rid of air fresheners and carpet powders and fabric softeners and, couch sprays for stain guarding. I can name, window cleaners that have a million chemicals and colors in them. If you start with that, that's just a matter of throwing things away. That's a really easy one. But then consider also how we handle radiation in our home. Very simple to start putting on airplane mode before you go to bed, keeping it away from your head, keeping laptops off your lap, because these are all signaling, basically EMF radiation that are going to these tech toys that we love and are probably not going anywhere soon. So it's just always a matter of how do you do what we're doing, but in a safer way, which I think is very reasonable. And then thinking of the less is more idea, where, sort of the less makeup if you can, but if you like all your makeup, just switching out those things you love to a little safer version. I teach high school, which you mentioned, because I did that with the TED Talk was really based around 2 pilot projects that I did here in Princeton, New Jersey, Princeton High School. And really, I would come in and lecture to them, and they would tell me what they know, and we really collected quite a bit of data. But I would also, toss a box of tampons at the jocks, and I would toss, the boys' body sprays at the girls, and everyone would giggle, and it would be a little uncomfortable at first. And then we would download a really vetted app from Environmental Working Group called the Skin Deep Database, which is in the book. And I would have them, each of the groups, look up that product, tell me what was in that product, tell me the rating of what they found that to be in terms of harm, and then tell me an alternative that may be better. And that way they had a tool to do what they needed to do to move through life choosing those products. So these are the kinds of things I want people to have, the fishing rod and not the fish, so to speak.
That's fascinating, just bringing an awareness to them, because they are young. And I always say when you get them at a younger age, they're just more pliable. I know, like, my kids have grown up with this, that's all they know. So they've never taken like any type of drug, an aspirin or anything. So sometimes I recall my daughter, one of my daughters, her friend was saying, "Gosh, I have a headache. Do you have an aspirin?" And my daughter looked at her and she goes, "Isn't that a drug?" And she's like, "Yeah. Why would you need that? You probably just need to drink more water." She goes, "How much water have you had?" She's like, "Oh, I really haven't had that much water." So it's great to get them when they're young, and you start educating them when they're young, because even a lot of the children nowadays, and I feel for the teachers, the elementary teachers right now, elementary school teachers, because of the learning disabilities that a lot of these kids have. That I know when I was in elementary school, I didn't see a lot of those kids, that there weren't a lot of misbehaved kids. And now it's pretty rampant. And I believe, a lot of it does have to do with everything that you're sharing, and how is that changing the DNA expression of each person too. So would love to hear that. And even on a hormonal aspect, what is it doing to, the brain, the hormones, of course, as estrogens impacting the liver. And I think people don't really understand that. So would love to hear.
Yeah, the book starts off really talking about the problem, the history of plastics, and then what the researchers have discovered about many of these chemicals, not just heavy metals like lead, which we know are, neurotoxins, and that there's actually now no safe level of lead, whereas for decades, they've been lowering what the EPA considers safe levels of exposure. And so now it's down to 0. And now we're starting to find that about a lot of these chemicals, because third-party groups like university-level researchers, international robust bodies of physicians and researchers have really started to speak up about this in terms of chemicals that are specifically called endocrine disrupting chemicals, or EDCs, which are in a lot of these, pesticides, but also plastic chemicals, BPA, which many people have heard about, was taken out of baby bottles in 2012 because of its health effects on infants, and in terms of being a mimicker of estrogens. So we really need to, instead of, kind of whack-a-mole chasing after these chemicals that get onto our market, and we have, again, 90,000 chemicals that circulate around us, we have about 1,000 known endocrine disruptors. And, when we talk about reducing these exposures, I'll give you another example where BPA loves to live, is in canned foods. All cans, whether it's your favorite soda or whether it's just, can of beans, the majority, if not 99.9% of cans in the world are really lined with bisphenol A, or BPA, which again was taken out of plastic baby bottles for health reasons, but was not taken out of canned foods. And, we get most of our ingestion of BPA exposure from ingestion. But here's the good news. BPA has a half-life of 6 hours, which means in about 24 hours, half, it keeps going down and down in your system if you're not exposed, you will rid your body from a good majority of BPA exposure if you change that one lifestyle change. And we talk about really great studies, a Harvard study on soup cans. It was just really remarkable how fast you can actually remove some of these environmental exposures that are endocrine disruptors from your lifestyle and from your body, literally. And, actually, I'll make mention, my partner, my co-author is Dr. Frederick Baum-Saul, and he is actually the researcher whose work really is responsible, him and his colleagues, for removing bisphenol A from baby bottles in 2012. So that's my partner, and, he's a renowned researcher. But we go into a lot of different classes of chemicals and tell you where they are so that you can start to remove them. And an alternative to cans is frozen foods. Frozen foods, even in bags. If you're not heating them up in bags, they're much safer to really use frozen foods, or fresh, of course. But frozen foods, they are picked right when they're harvested, and they actually have almost more nutrient value than fresh foods, fresh produce, because fresh actually travels a very long distance often to get to your supermarket. And even if it's organic, that means less chemicals, less pesticides, but doesn't necessarily mean that it has quality nutrient value. And nutrient value is something we also need to help protect us from environmental chemicals, as the book shows, that you want to be nutrient sufficient to battle, what we're up against right now. So lots of solutions, not overwhelming, and just really simple hacks on how to do this. Because again, it has to be accessible for everybody to know that this matters. Oh, can't hear you. Oh, there you go.
Dr. Ailey?
Yes.
You can hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So I don't know what happened. That brings me to the next question that comes to my mind. So we talked about all these chemicals and where they are and things that we can do and how we can start kind of doing simple changes so we can start avoiding all this exposure. But what's the big deal anyway? What if we don't, what's doing to our health? What is that big deal? Why do we need to change? Why is it necessary?
Yeah, no, great question. I was hoping we'd have time to get to this. So, when we talk about the human body and evolution and how long it's taken to get to this point, millions and millions of years for our body to have gotten to a point where we can safely detox from a variety of organs, we're just built well, believe it or not. And we want to utilize those ability to sweat and our liver enzymes and our kidney enzymes and all the ways to break down a lot of chemicals. But the question is, well, why should we care? How do these chemicals work? We have an endocrine system. Endocrine system is a very vulnerable system in the human body. Just like we have the immune system, we have the endocrine system, and they talk back and forth to each other. They're not isolated. And the endocrine system and these endocrine disrupting chemicals, which are able to disrupt our endocrine system, means that they're breaking up and messing with signals in the body that we know of as hormones. So hormones are signalers. They're chemicals in the body that tell your body to grow or manage your thyroid gland in terms of development in utero for the baby needs, working thyroid chemicals like iodine from the mom. But we also have fertility, which is hormone, regulated. We have brain development in utero. We have bone development and strengthening, such as, as for bone loss, growth and loss, of course. But also fat cells are driven by hormones in the body, whether they get larger or smaller. Insulin is a hormone. So whether or not we utilize sugar properly and our muscles churn up glucose has a lot to do with our insulin, creation and breakdown. So we have all these really important chemicals in the body. Puberty, obviously, we have estrogens and testosterone, and they're very vulnerable. And so when these chemicals are disrupting, they're actually either reducing the amount that are created, they're blocking the receptors at the site where the activity happens. There's a lot of different mechanisms, but essentially they're messing with the body's natural ability to signal its physiology and change. And that can increase risk for a whole host of conditions, chronic comorbidities like diabetes, of course. We've had fertility issues that have been on the rise that can be very strongly associated with environmental chemicals. We have a variety of congenital issues in newborns that can be attributed to exposures in utero while pregnant. And we have a whole bunch of cancers that have been increasing that are hormone sensitive, such as breast cancer, thyroid cancer, prostate cancer, endometrial, uterine cancer. So we really want to get a handle on getting these chemicals out of our body so that they can allow the body to do its own natural, healthy hormone signaling and keep those processes, on track.
Now, you mentioned earlier too that there was an app that you can, that are, I guess ourselves. I don't have one on my phone. I know how I shop, but for people that are trying to make some changes in their life, I love ewg.org. It's a wonderful website, and I know that you've been a contributor and you collaborated with them and doing some work that a lot of that's probably also in your book, and we'll let people go to your book for that information. But is there like an app where I know at one point you could just pick up you can scan the barcode and you could find out a lot about it?
Yeah, we list a lot of apps throughout the book for various things.
Great.
So even like air quality, you can actually, download an app that will give you the air quality, pollution level, ozone level, in real time in your zip code. People don't know these things exist, and that's another way to manage outdoor air quality. Certainly, out west we have major problems, but even on the East Coast now with combustion and car exhaust and all the different contributors to air pollution. But what you're talking about for cosmetics is something I'm happy to share because, again, I want people to be educated, and that's called the ewg.org/skin deep database. So you could just go ewg.org and do a slash, I guess it's a backslash, skin deep, one word. And that's a website, from ewg.org. You can type in your products. You can do drop downs to find safer products. They do rating systems. But the app that they created is called Healthy Living. 2 words, Healthy Living. It's free. And that's what I have the kids do, is to download that to their phones so that they have it ready to go whenever they go shopping. Wonderful. I'm glad you put that up. So again, it's all about tools. It's getting savvy with them. It's feeling like you're in control to make healthy choices for your body. And we just wanted to make sure that people had really smart information that wasn't wacky, but that would really get people to the right resources and to feel empowered.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Ailey, one more question, which is something we've focused a lot on things that we can do for ourselves and what we can do to get rid of things in our house and products that we're using and the foods that we're eating. But what about for the environment? If we're thinking about the environment, and you mentioned something huge a little while ago, which is plastic and disposing of plastic, that it's medical, that waste. It's not able to be, waste and everything. But what are the other things aside from using plastic that we can do to help the environment and decrease toxins?
So one of the things, first of all, that's great because what you're pointing out is really what we all instinctively know is that we're not living in a bubble, that what we do to the earth, what we do to our environment feeds right back into our bodies and into our bodies of our kids and our pets. I mean, in my case, my pets, and certainly cats lick their hands and they're getting all these chemicals. Hands. Did I mean that? I mean paws. I've humanized my cat and dog. It's weird. But anyway, the idea is that, it's a one big circular situation where whatever we contribute to the earth, it will come back to us. And we have to think about that. So for instance, drinking water. Drinking water is something where when we dirty our streams and we pollute our water bodies, when we have industrial runoff, when we have farming runoff from feedlots, any pollution in the air falls into the water. These water systems actually go right into these municipal tap systems to go back into our drinking water. And so the more we can clean up our environment, the less likely we're going to get that in through our systems for drinking. But even just avoiding plastic water bottles. I mean, one of the recommended filtration systems that I talk about in the book quite heavily is something that I have for my own family, which is a reverse osmosis water system, which at this point, they're $250. They're $300 maximum from a vetted NSF certified, or Consumer Reports rated, group. And we give those resources to find that. But they're not cost prohibitive. And if you put that in your home under your sink, no matter whether your water is really dirty from a well or really dirty from tap water, you're cleaning it at the point of use. And that's where you would fill up your glass and stainless steel bottles. You wouldn't have to buy pallets and pallets of plastic bottles that are going to end up somewhere, somehow in our environment. So thinking about that circular system of cleaning up yourself, but also knowing that it's having some kind of beneficial effect on our environment and vice versa is really quite important. And we talk about that a lot throughout the book, just to keep reminding people that we don't live in a vacuum.
That's awesome. And where can people go to connect with you? And is there one of the websites? I know you've got a couple different websites. Your book is now available on Amazon. It's at Barnes & Noble and even at your website, correct? Where can people connect?
I don't think it's on Barnes & Noble. There were some issues there, but definitely Amazon. And then there's also, if you go to thesmarthuman.com, which is my platform for all things health prevention, environmental health, there's tons of podcasts, radio shows, articles that I think are very interesting. But that's also the landing page for the book. And we have links to Amazon, but also to independent booksellers, which I think is a nice thing to do. In addition, The Smart Human, which I started again out of frustration several years back to get this information out to as many people, everyday people as possible, I post Monday, Wednesday, Friday, generally on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Monday is generally a sustainability type of post with lots of information about the world and how we're connecting with it, or cool inventions. Wednesdays are usually about physiology, nutrition. I think I posted today on iodine and how iodine affects the human body, and even how environmental chemicals can actually affect the thyroid in terms of iodine. So, they're nuggets of information tied to good articles for quick reads, for bulleted information. And then Fridays are usually mental health Fridays because we need it. And it's usually humorous or has some sort of message to get us into the weekend. And, talks about sort of social issues or, nothing political, really stay away from politics because science doesn't belong in politics and vice versa. And, so I'm really anxious to share this with everybody if they want to keep following and get information like this regularly. But, I practice in Princeton, so it's not hard to find me at all. So it's just Aly Cohen, MD, ALY Cohen, COHEN, MD.com. But The Smart Human's my baby, so I hope people will really check into that and support it and invite people so that they get some, nice free vetted information, little bits and pieces.
And how was your name on Twitter? How can they find you on Twitter?
The Smart Human. Everything is The Smart Human because I want everyone listening and everyone reading to be the smart human. It's not me, I promise. Everyone asks me that. I say it's about you, not me. So
wonderful.
Yeah.
Dr. Ailey, thank you so much for being here. I can't imagine how much benefit everybody got. I learned so much and I'm ready to make so many changes. I'm ready to throw so many things away, and I can't wait to finish. I already started reading your book. I cannot wait to finish your book and keep learning because it is something that it's around us, it's on us, it's in us, and we certainly have the power and nobody else to change it. So
it doesn't discriminate. So that's one of the beauty of the message that we got from you today. We really appreciate it, and thank God there's someone like you out there that's putting out this information. And you're living it and you're using it in your own practice, in your own home. But as you were sharing, it's applicable in little bits and pieces and sound bites because it appears that we're on overdrive now. And that's how people learn, is like, okay, it's a quick 10-minute this. If I can get that 10-minute nugget, it's like, wow, that was gold. So in your book is laid out that way, so anybody can read it. I think they need to put that as a requirement in the high school curriculum.
Everywhere.
Yeah, let's do it,
Girls.
Mhm.
I mean, that's the goal. The goal is really to get this to young people. I mean, everybody, really, pre-pregnant, pregnant people, everyone. But young people that's my area, because I really think that's the greatest, because of their hormonal changes and all the vulnerabilities of these hormonal periods. Teenagers, they know how to work apps. They're interested. They're body aware. They're going to vote one day. They're going to have potentially children if they choose one day. So, this is an area, if you have kids or grandkids, please consider passing these messages along, because it really does take a village, and you guys, it's really critical to get this out there, and you guys are supporting that. So I applaud you for opening up your platform to me for speaking. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you once again. And thank you for everybody, all our audience. Don't forget to find Dr. Aly Cohen at thesmarthuman.com, or you can find her TED Talk as well. Her book is The Non-Toxic Guide of Living in a Chemical World. You can find it at The Smart Human. You can buy it off of Amazon as well, and just keep on learning and be better every day of your life.
That's the journey.
All right. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Be well.